Hi and welcome to the weekly predictions based on astrology for the week of December 21, 2020. In terms of the stock market direction, I think this will likely be a week of strong moves, as in maybe greater than usual in magnitude regardless of the direction. In terms of specific direction, I think it will pretty much be a down week, and perhaps on the very, last day when the market is open, which is Thursday, there may be a move up. Not a very great chance, I would say, but overall this looks like a down week to me. And speaking of the overall direction, I had made predictions about the beginning of November, where basically I put down that I thought that the second to third week of November is going to see a major market reversal, probably a top. And then I thought that maybe by the 19th or so of November, the market will start going down, and will go down for some weeks, if not months. So we haven't had, the 16th was a local top, but the market continued slowly going down after making a fairly large move in indeed November. So the month of November, it did see quite a strong rally. However, it didn't then turn to down after November 16th. However, the actual, the rate with which it continued to rise had significantly declined. And so I believe that with separating sort of supportive aspects that would be supportive of the market going up, which is the Jupiter conjunct Pluto, that transit is currently continuing to separate. And we're entering, starting already from like the 16th of December into the end of this month, and then, especially into January, we will see more and more of difficult transits. So I believe that the overall direction is still going to change in the next few days. If not, or for the next few weeks, I think it will actually turn down. And then starting in January, I'd say January 4th, 6th or so through early February, it's going to be quite a wild ride, because we will have a lot of really strong and sort of disruptive transits at that time. So going back to this week, as I said, is going to be a fairly important week. We have, of course, as I'm sure many astrologers have pointed out, a grand conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn, and both planets are entering right now into Aquarius. So they're changing sign, and they're together super duper closely for the first time since 397 years ago or so. The bottom line is that it's a strong transit, which has certain meanings, and in particular what I've looked at, what had happened in the past during similar conjunctions, we have major changes that are related to either certain laws or individuals who are in power, some sort of like royalty, or it could also be, of course, just known prominent individuals who are very well educated, perhaps like judges, diplomats, ambassadors, or tops of corporations, especially multinational corporations. So individuals that come to power or lose power at this time, whatever the change in power and the shift in those areas, or say there's a new project announced at this time that is related to like a long distance transportation, or there's a legal change that again say affects travel, communication, import, export. Those changes will likely then be in place for some time, like decades. And similarly, if there's a leader that comes to power, like a king is enthroned or something like that, or a new leader is appointed at this time, that person will most likely again be in power for a long time. So changes that are occurring at this time, or say if there's a new company that's getting incorporated, or something like that, something that's a new beginning of some project, at this time, those projects or those appointments, I guess, will tend to last for a long time, longer than expected. And similarly, this is also the time where either prominent individuals or prominent entities, companies, for example, or certain projects that perhaps were overblown in terms of their expenses, maybe a project that was involved developing, again, something to do with, say, long distance transportation or airlines or airspace, something that was overdue. And I heard basically there's some news about some, I think, air station leaking oxygen or something like that. So yes, indeed, projects that have sort of outlived their duration, or maybe there was something in development that never has really been completed. At this time, such projects would tend to be canceled and leaders replaced, and this would also be a time where either people who were in power for a long time would be basically removed from power, or projects, especially, like I said, those who were lasting for a really long time and maybe had outlived their sort of usefulness. This is also the time of endings as well. So in addition to this grand conjunction, we also, this particular week, have Pluto and Mars square, and that is a disruptive transit as well, which tends to coincide with things like from just intense kind of unfortunate weather events to things like earthquakes, mudslides, sort of disasters, accidents where things are being shaken up, and say there's an earthquake or mudslide, and that may result in maybe an accident at the mine, or something that's moving really fast but it exceeds its speed, or the fire that breaks out that does more damage than perhaps at other times, or an accident that involves some sports event where, again, something is moving too fast, or things are being done too aggressively, and certain safety measures do not really work as well. And similarly, this is also the time where we may hear about more like protests, attacks, violence, or just if there's some skirmishes somewhere where maybe the neighboring countries already have some tense relations. This is the time where things can be a little bit more on edge, and certain things may escalate more than usual. So unfortunately, as I said, if there's some escalation that goes kind of beyond just the usual, skirmishes at this time, if there's like a major declaration, like especially legalized change, then this is not a good time for that, in the sense that if tensions boil to the point where some legal intervention is needed, then this project or this initiative may indeed also lead to situation that may last for a long time. Of course, if a situation that's been dangerous or difficult is stopped again through some legal means, especially officially at this time, then again that peace or whatever the resolution of that agreement is would also be in place for a long time, again several decades. So definitely important week. Whatever the decisions that are made, either positive or negative, they will likely be in place again for longer than expected. So in terms of the actual probability of like earthquakes, various disasters, or just important events, the specific days that I would look for would be 21st through the 23rd of December. And at that time, there may be some developments that are quite significant and affect the markets, but also affect international relations, especially communication, long-distance transportation, and status of prominent leaders. And again, as I mentioned, this could be like royalty, but also clergy, especially anyone who is like either really old or somehow conservative or orthodox. Also, there may be some major events that are related to like international again relations, and maybe there's some changes again in status and military escalations, as I mentioned, protest accidents. And those accidents or those escalations may have to do with either, again, some changes in legal status, or legal changes maybe in response to those events to kind of maybe perhaps put a stop to that. But also there may be increased tensions, or decisions may be specifically guided by either differences in religion, in beliefs, in culture, or perhaps again relate to international travel. Then December 19th through the 23rd is a period that additionally is significant for sort of events and developments related to IT, telecommunications, airspace, social media like electric cars, electronics, and also power plants. So anything that's like super high tech, developed, and moves really fast. And there we may hear about some new regulations, or like import-export regulations, or regulations that have to do with perhaps some limitations that are imposed on like international import-export travel, or some sort of aim to protect intellectual property. So there may also be some disagreements, again, of legal nature, where some court or something would need to intervene to resolve these disagreements. And disagreements may also be, like I said, based on either culture or beliefs about basically what's right, what's wrong. And those areas, specifically, as I mentioned, the aerospace, IT, electric cars, high tech, etc. Those areas this week especially may hear, or rather may see, some important announcements. And again, I would pay close attention to any such announcements, be it about new inventions or discoveries or new projects or ending of projects, because again, those may have a longer than usual sort of effect on those areas. So even if the announcement itself may not appear sort of as critical at this time, but just by the fact that it is appearing at this particular week, it may be something that we may hear about or will have sort of long-term consequences. Similarly, if there's a project announced at this time in those areas, especially like say aerospace, it may not be as necessarily quickly developing. It's not going to be like rising immediately to stardom, so to speak, but something that's like a seed that's planted at this time may sort of grow steadily, and over like years to come, it may actually be more successful than expected. Then from about the 20th to 23rd of December, globally, like I said, this is also unfortunately a tense time where there's a greater than usual probability of violent protests or just attacks, earthquakes. The protests may particularly be geared towards anti-government or anti-police brutality or anti-some corruption. And there may also be, on the positive side, increased news about like scientific discoveries. And again, those probably would relate to like either, say, aerospace or IT, or perhaps long distance transportation. And the areas where either disruptions, like I said, accidents, for example, may occur, or even some discoveries may be not just in the areas that I just mentioned, like IT, aerospace, or long distance travel, but also they may be either in cold areas, cold climates, so something maybe along the lines of like cold, icy places, like maybe Arctic shipping routes, or somewhere really, cold, like underground. I guess underground may not necessarily be cold, because I guess it's warmer after a certain point. But something that's either really cold and icy, so towards like the poles, or it could be something that's hidden and underground, literally, say a mine. Like I said, it could be an earthquake, and maybe it causes some accident at a mine, or something that's buried underground or hidden, or literally, not literally, but rather hidden because it's involves some sort of secrets. And with this Jupiter and Saturn getting into Aquarius, the situations may involve things where you have this sort of air and stone, I guess air and ice, I don't know, or gas and ice kind of combined. So for example, I'm thinking of some developments where there's a new initiative to, say, mine asteroids or even comets, or some news related to maybe a new comet is discovered, or maybe there is some sort of mining operation where there's like a large, I don't know, leak of gas or something like that, or that something that's like really basically is gas that quickly either is frozen, or vice versa, something that's like maybe a gas that becomes volatile really quickly. And again, this kind of makes me think of space exploration, but also could be some sort of like an underground, gas buildup that suddenly is punctured and there's a leak and leads to an explosion. Or it could be an accident that relates to, say, sports or escalation of some military fighting, where again there is some underhanded, secretive, tactics where perhaps one opponent is playing fairly and is really trying to push forward with their strength and their skill, and the other opponent is not playing fairly and using some underhanded tactics. So definitely some tensions. And in terms of just like everyday life, I would say that it just is a good idea to take things, I would say, slower maybe, and not rush into anything, and kind of think things through in terms of making decisions. This is a good time for making long-term decisions, but Saturn favors those that are made with discipline and after thinking everything through. So if things are being well evaluated and analyzed, then the resulting initiative may be quite successful long-term. And similarly, if say one is driving, definitely avoid rushing and take it kind of be careful, basically, especially for those who have who were born like in the beginning degrees of the fixed signs such as Aquarius. Let's see. So as I mentioned, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I think the market will go down. Thursday, I think the market will go up, or at the minimum, I think Wednesday to Thursday, there's going to be a change in the direction. So the energy shifts around the 24th, becomes, I guess, a little bit less stressful. And of course, on the 25th, Friday, the US markets will be closed. So in terms of the global kind of transits that we have that are kind of coloring this time in general, I think that through the 30th of December, things will become a little bit more and more kind of oriented towards like long-term thinking, long-term sort of savings and wealth preservation. The energy of Jupiter and Pluto, like I said, conjunction is going to be waning slowly. And so I wouldn't say people will be less and less optimistic, but kind of this hyper sort of optimism or boundless optimism perhaps will be subsiding, and thoughts kind of in focus on kind of making sure that things are more balanced, which is this Saturn and Jupiter conjunction has to do with like balancing things, expansion and contraction. Those things will kind of, I think, lead investors to kind of maybe turn a little bit more practical and perhaps slow down a little bit, or invest hopefully into things that, again, they view as being successful long term, and specifically areas that relate to Aquarius, again, airspace, telecommunications, anything that's electric, electronics, and high tech, the sort of more innovative, the more kind of, I wouldn't say crazy, but the more, sci-fi, the sort of better, because with Saturn in the sign, whatever sign it is in, I've seen that this will be the time period where there will be a lot of innovations and specifically scientific progress in those areas. So this would be like computers, airlines, airspace exploration, etc. As I mentioned, some protests may be coming, unfortunately, especially this week. Let's see. Then also through the end of this year, there may be increased news about various, because of the influence of Jupiter, important news about various types of legal decisions or policies, especially involving, as I mentioned, long distance transportation, international relations, immigration, and any sort of large scale construction projects. And again, especially those that are related to like connecting either countries, say a tunnel or a bridge, or say a railroad, or maybe a plant that produces like a large machinery, something that's really large scale kind of construction. Either the project itself is large scale, or perhaps a plant that manufactures this machinery that's used for large scale construction of some sort. So that's till the end of this year, where there may be increased news about such projects. Let's see. And I think that starting the early next year, there may be less focus on the news related to, say, COVID per se. We will have, I think, slightly less like the Saturn Pluto under which this epidemics had started. That aspect is separating more and more, of course, slowly, very slowly, but I think will be less focus on sort of news about COVID pandemic. Although, as I mentioned in my previous predictions and on my blog at lastunka.com, I do see that we will have Neptune conjunct Saturn coming up in 2025, so as early as the end of 24 and through about early 26, there may actually be news about another pandemic, and that one actually I would be more concerned about or prepare for, because that's the same aspect that previously took place in 1918 when we had the Spanish flu pandemic, and certainly with Neptune being present there may be increased news about various kind of viruses, etc. Of course, it could be along the lines of inventions, maybe new way of healing something as well, so it doesn't have to be necessarily negative. But I would say starting 2021, there will be not as much focus on this COVID pandemic. That said, specifically January into early February is going to be a wild ride, because there are just so many really tense and kind of exact transits that occur just sort of all at the same time. So there'll be many surprises coming up in January. Let's see. So for China, mid-December through end of January of 2021, especially at the very end of December and early January, may see specifically for China also announcements about some sort of new beginnings for the country, some new vision or some new major projects or some new goals. And those, again, may be really grand in scale and involve, again, those same areas as I mentioned that are going to be important globally, which is airlines, aerospace, high-tech, networks, power plants, any sort of engineering projects, maybe like a new airport or something like that, or also would be related potentially to healthcare and veterinary care. And those will be accelerated or achieve greater heights. And again, those will be new long-term plans. There may also be increased changes for China in terms of its status or relations with other countries, not just one-on-one, but rather its participation as being a part of some community or some larger sort of organization such as APEC, or membership in some other organization. So there may be some shifting there, like new friends, come or go, or its status as a participant in some larger community changes. And there may also be some new regulations passed there that specifically affect or are related to human rights and freedoms. Again, doesn't have to be anything negative, but just will be increased focus on those areas specifically for China, specifically I would say mid-December through early January. Also through between now and February of 2021, I think there will be increased focus on oil, chemicals, pollution, gas, and also there may be the news might relate to maybe there are some surprising developments or surprising announcements about earnings or losses, and the next time period next year where we may hear more about either oil, say, producing countries or oil shipments or oil prices will be in April and then in September, and particularly like April, let's say 8 to 11 and September 1st through 3rd, and at those same time, April and in September, while we will have those increased news about oil and also gas, chemicals and their prices, there may also be kind of a potentially drops in the stock market due to some concerns. In January, I will name a few dates where I think there's a heightened possibility of just kind of difficult events. The whole month, I would say, is a wild ride, but especially January 10, 16, 20, 24, 27 through 31st, and then February 6th, we may not only have some fluctuations greater than expected in the stock market, but also perhaps either some problems related to too much water or oil, like an oil spill or some gas leak or some accident, disaster that relates somehow to water in the shape of, gas, ice, or liquid. Maybe excessive, precipitation leads to some problems. And in the past, what we had were like this problem with the Bayou sinkhole in the US, or in like Russia, there was some sort of a winter park or water park where the roof had collapsed and killed several dozen people, and that's because there was too much snow on the roof. So something where you have too much precipitation, too much snow, or there's a disaster and it causes too much sort of water or gas or something that's liquid or in the form of a gas to kind of spread further than it should have been. And so this could be blizzards, storms, oil spills, chemical spills, outbreak of some sort of infectious diseases. And again, not necessarily COVID, just something that's like infectious. Or it could be an issue that occurs at areas that are related to, water and Neptune in general. So those would be like ships and navy, or perhaps hospitals, prisons, places of worships, and even monasteries, places that are like meant to be where people go to kind of rest and recuperate. And unfortunately, those will be the areas in January through early February where those problems may occur more likely. And as I mentioned, greater market volatility at the same time, especially for the week of January 11. And it's going to be quite at least exciting, if not disruptive, and not just because of weather, but also there may be increased number of accidents, and especially, like I said, those related to water in some way, but also at the same time, there may also be excessive, in the week of January 11, excessive wind, like power outages, and for the market, some changes or some surprising events related to currencies. And so those events, again, throughout the entire month of January, but especially week of January 11, they may be really surprising, shocking, and may involve situations where something is really abrupt and sudden. So a project or a situation that was ongoing suddenly is canceled, and or new situation suddenly introduced without sort of preparation. So look for fluctuations in the currencies, especially cryptocurrencies, definitely, and this could be a really wild ride up and down. Or it could be somebody who's really wealthy acting in a very like eccentric manner, and with this Aquarian influence makes me think of someone like Elon Musk, somebody who is maybe smart but wealthy and eccentric, something like that. So again, surprises there. And for the US, interestingly, on the January 20th, the presidential inauguration day, will have Mars exactly conjunct Uranus and squaring the Jupiter and Saturn. And so that's interesting. Whatever the situation may be, I think there will be some surprise, or perhaps just really windy, kind of unfortunate weather, but there may also be some surprising developments, perhaps accidents, and something that may involve like either airplanes or flying objects or some airborne objects, fires, explosions, service outages, including on like social media or trading platforms, and just stock market volatility, especially for forex and cryptocurrencies. And also, let's see, for China, as I mentioned, the end of December into early January is an important time for some new beginnings, new big projects like engineering projects or IT or telecommunications or networks, something like innovative, high tech. But also then starting mid-February to about mid-March of 2021, they may enter just into some powerful alliances, or there will be some expansion in the military, either military or showcasing of their military might, especially related to Navy. And then early to mid-March 2021, there may be some increased kind of focus on power plays, some secrets or some manipulation when it comes to the relations with their partners. And there may be some issues coming up with kind of whether something that's being done either to China or by China is legal, whether there are like secretive activities, data breaches, or hacking. And at the same time, there may be news out of China or about China about expansion of the military, and also something related to like nuclear power and recycling capabilities. So again, something that involves basically focus on strengthening power, be it power, you know, nuclear power as in weapons, nuclear power plants, or expanding militarily, or increasing like number or strengthening existing alliances. So something like that in the spring for China. Let's see. And globally, December of this year through February of 2021, generally speaking, there may be increased number of corporations, especially large corporations or governments throughout the world that may have some problems, basically financial issues. They may declare bankruptcies or get bailouts, so definitely somewhat of a stressful time. At the same time, there may be a lot of restructuring to, I guess, kind of voluntary restructuring to basically voluntary kind of cutting losses, and this may be accompanied by kind of reduced services or service outages. And again, the global sort of changes that may be coming starting January of next year, just to kind of give this preview, we will have from about January of 2021 through November of 2022, Saturn and Uranus square, so it will occur multiple times. January 21, like late June to early July of 21, and then mid-November of 2021. And during this time, there may be again some sort of strong changes or significant developments related to, again, IT, airspace, airlines, or situations that involve issues of like freedom and human rights, or basically groups that are, some groups may be fighting for freedom, equality, and that there will be this force that represents more like Saturn, where that force will try to impose more restrictions, controls, and regulations. And so this kind of a upcoming, I would say, year and a half will have the strong focus on this background kind of influence of let's push for innovation, let's push for some revolutionary kind of a new cool, you know, stuff. And then there will be some regulators who will basically try to slow that down, because again, there might also be some issues for airlines, for example, at those times for where maybe some innovation is going to be throttled, or perhaps certain things may not be allowed to happen because they may be considered unsafe, and or certain new regulations or testing or verification may be introduced before, you know, airline can fly or people can fly on the airplanes. And this may also increased regulations for, say, currencies like cryptocurrencies, anything that any sort of data exchange that occurs electronically, and similarly for like social media networks, any sort of internet-based businesses. There may be, again, over the next year and a half, January through November 22, there may be January 2021 through November 2022, there may be sort of this background development of increased regulations of these kind of areas, such as, again, telecommunications, airlines, sort of airspace exploration, and networks, any internet-based businesses, financial sort of services that are occurring, again, over the internet. All of those may see increased regulation. Some of this will be for sort of establishing controls, but also for safety reasons. Let's see. And also, I guess, for US, an interesting Type of developments that might be coming up in 2021 that are worth mentioning here is April, August, and December of 2021. We'll see increased news about like value of US dollar, some maybe accompanied by some changes in the fiscal policies, and that may also coincide with increased focus and news about gold and silver prices, especially gold. So it could be just 3 separate developments, or it could be a new situation that arises in April, then sort of something is reviewed in August, and then the final resolution takes place in December of 2021. Let's see. And for the US, sort of to look again ahead just a couple of years, in 22 and 23, but I would say starting as early as maybe mid 2021, so this next year, but especially developing in 2022, US will go through what's called the Pluto Return, which is the first time since its establishment Pluto will come back to its own position in the natal chart, which happens to be in the second house of, at least the chart that I'm using, of finance and banks. And in general, Pluto is going to have to do with things, Pluto return rather, will have to do with things like uncovering sort of governmental scandals or change in power both in governments and in basically large organizations and corporations. And those entities who perhaps were in power before, they may find themselves suddenly be powerless and vice versa. And similarly, since it is in the second house of finance and earnings and also values, those areas may undergo really drastic changes where things that were considered to be valuable before, even as a sort of on a national level, suddenly will not be valuable as much and or at all. And similarly, this could be entities, or it could be literally what people thought that was important to them suddenly is not, and or entities that perhaps maybe, especially financial institutions that maybe were considered to be all kind of powerful and had a lot of value assigned to them, suddenly that they may either lose it, go bankrupt, or be perceived as not so powerful anymore, and vice versa. New players may emerge that will have power. And similarly, also, not similarly, but rather at the same time, so especially in 22, but starting already somewhat in 2021 and through early 2023, we will have Neptune basically entering 4th house in US chart, and that would coincide with significant developments related to real estate, banks' assets, and also farming, agriculture, and sort of food supply or food production. So Neptune, as you can imagine, may have to do with things like water, excessive water, flooding, and of course, if there's a flood or pollution, this may affect food production and value of food. Similarly, for real estate, there may be some confusion as far as again, value of real estate, but also there may be literally real estate underwater, be it due to literally floods, or could be underwater because of some problems with like mortgages. And of course that would affect banks, and this would also tie exactly with what I mentioned before, Pluto going to its natal position in the second house of banks and financial institutions. Not everybody uses this exact chart in terms of the houses, but in the past I did see it work well for the US, so that's sort of where I see those transits going in the upcoming several years for the US. So the bottom line there would be that over the next few years there will be fairly significant changes in the US governance, in leadership and power, as in like who's in power, how this power is distributed, who is, who governs how. And this may also, Pluto does not really do things, easily and comfortably. Rather, it's a fairly sort of a dictatorial, I would say, planet where literally Phoenix, needs to burn down before it rises back again. So things that have not been working, they will be discarded quite brutally. At the same time, new beginnings may emerge that could be, again, quite powerful, and then will be in place for a long time. Some sort of a time of rebirth, and transformation awaits. And as I mentioned, this week is a significant week, and the reason I'm giving you this sort of a preview for upcoming weeks is just because those things are related. The weeks is not, the information from one week is not sort of in the vacuum, but certain events with this grand conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn that are going to be occurring this week, whatever they are, I would pay attention, especially in your life as well. And even if you don't think they're significant, I would say they probably will eventually have more significance than even maybe you would have expected. So something to keep in mind, and I hope that you have a fantastic week and enjoy your holidays, and we'll come back and check me out next week on this channel. Until then, bye guys.